Hello and welcome to today's screencast tutorial on building an HTML5 template using PHP Includes. So the bottom line of today's tutorial is to introduce students to a stepping stone in between coding HTML by hand and actually having a completely database-driven backend system. Usually students start off with writing their HTML by hand using Notepad, Notepad++, Text Wrangler, basically a plain text editor. Go on to using Adobe Dreamweaver most often, and then from there they wind up using content management systems such as WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, and things like that. To go in between, let's say, the level of being very comfortable writing the code by hand and then starting to understand the levels of abstraction that are incorporated into content management systems that are built by professional programmers. Understanding the basic idea of taking an HTML page apart and rebuilding it using the power of the server to assemble the HTML and put in specific content in specific places. The basic concept to master is the PHP include. Now, includes have been around for a long time under the name of server-side includes, for example, and the concept has really not changed in well over a decade. In recent years, PHP has come to the forefront in web development, and we're now referring to PHP includes, but go back 10-15 years, server-side includes did exactly the same thing. So if we take a look at our template here, as you can see, it's only 42 lines of code, very basic stuff, and even in those 42 lines, I've actually included a few comments to help guide my readers to understand what these things are. So quickly starting from the top, we can see that it is a HTML5 doc type, so line 1. Then we go on to the HTML tag, which is specifically in the English language, the head, the character set, which is UTF-8, which is Unicode, meaning that we can type in accented characters and they will successfully make it to the browser without being replaced with those horrible little black triangles. And then on lines 6 to 8, here I have one tag, the title tag, which is important for search engine optimization, which we refer to as SEO for short. So the title itself is a very important tag. It's in Dreamweaver by default, but a lot of people do not know how to use it well, at least not when they start. The meta description, which is not included in Dreamweaver's default HTML, is another very important tag for search engine optimization. If we quickly take a look, for example, at a Google search, and here I typed in Montreal Web Design, you can see that the blue links, those are actually supposed to be the title tag, and the little paragraph underneath is the meta description. Now, it's not 100% sure that that is exactly what's going to happen. There's a bit of interpretation on Google's part, so if they think that the content that you put in your title and description are not good enough, they may actually go in and take something out of the body of the page. But in theory, the blue link is your title and the little paragraph description underneath is the meta description. So you can see how important those things are because that's what people read, that's what they will click. So if you don't convince them that your page is the page that they want in those two tags, you've basically lost a chance to show people your web design skills. So on line 14, we have the meta author, so I'm basically saying that I wrote this page. And otherwise on the following lines 17 and 18, I have the link to my CSS style sheet and to the modernizer JavaScript. The important thing to understand is that we are building templates right now, and templates as such, we don't exactly know where they are going to be used in the final website. They could be at the root level, they could be in one folder, they could be much further down. So because of that unpredictability about where the actual template will be used, it could be at the root level of the website, it could be much further deep in one folder or in a subfolder or in a sub-subfolder. The possibilities are endless. And when you write paths in HTML, you usually create document relative paths, meaning you explain the way to get to, for example, your style sheet starting from the current document. So it could be, one level above, one level below, they could be side by side, they could be 3, 4, 5 folders apart. So for those of you who are used to typing your HTML, you will see that in many cases you'll have ... It could be ... CSS/style.css. And because usually we code with document relative paths, that is not something that you can put in a template. In a template, the link always has to work. It always has to be good, no matter where the template is going to be used. And the trick is to use what we call a root relative path, meaning that starting from, let's say, the .com level of the website, so just the main address, you specify, starting at root, go into this folder, go into this folder, go get that file. And in HTML, the / character means root. So in this case, the CSS file itself is going to be found inside the CSS folder, which is at root. Use this path anywhere inside the site, and it's always valid. So the main trick, like I said, start with a / and then starting from the root level folder, just go and specify where to find the file. The ending of the path to my CSS file, I use a little trick that comes from the HTML5 boilerplate. When you are designing and changing the CSS file, uploading it, changing it, uploading it again, the server's cache and maybe even the browser's cache can come into play. So as far as the server's cache, what the little $v = 2 does is for the server, for the Apache web server software, the $ means that there's some sort of scripting involved. And because of that, it knows that it must always go back and fetch the original version of the file from the hard drive, not basically resend something that is already in the cache. So for designers who spend a lot of time updating their CSS files, this almost guarantees that you will always see the latest version of your style rules. Going further into the document, we close the head, we open up the body, and then we start putting in content that will describe the page. So right now I haven't put anything fancy in there yet, but we have the header tag, which is really reserved for the branding. So that's the big, visually interesting block at the top of the page that tells us where we're at. So eventually we will be putting something interesting in here. The navigation would, for example, possibly go here. I haven't done anything, but eventually it's going to go there. And we start with the main div, which is the article tag. So this is where the content of the page goes. So everything from line 26 on up is actually very standard stuff. It's going to be there on every page. I want it to be on every page. And I don't necessarily want to have to recode all this stuff over and over and over again. So The idea of making the template is when I build the template, I put absolutely everything that I need, including tags that are not there by default. I put in the paths to the required elements that I have, and then I will be recycling this part of the HTML over and over again. So since it's a template, if I wind up with 1,000 pages on my website, I can come to my template, change something, and automatically the 1,000 pages worth of content are updated. So continuing down, you see that I've got two comments over here, line 28 and 32. This is the unique page content. So if everything above it is always the same, this part over here is what makes this page interesting. For example, it could be a contact form. It could be a series of thumbnails of your portfolio. This is where we actually are going to spend a lot of our time working to make this page interesting. And afterwards, this is the footer area. So the closing of the main article tag, the footer itself, where right now there's only a copyright, a root relative link to jQuery, and the closing of the body and the HTML tags. So this stuff at the bottom will also never change. Really, all of this and all of that will be moved out, and our page will only have its true content. And that is where things start getting interesting, because you let the server assemble the HTML has been tested, it's all okay, and then you focus on the things that are important. What is supposed to be on this page? What is supposed to be on that page? Now, just a little thing about JavaScript. Once again, I am pretty much following the lead of what is in the HTML5 boilerplate. And the common practice in web design is to put the JavaScript at the bottom. We put Modernizer at the top because the Modernizer JavaScript is the one that enables older browsers to understand HTML5. So that's important because before the browser starts reading new tags, it needs this sort of crutch to be able to understand new tags that it was never originally programmed to be able to make sense of. So for example, an older browser would have been very comfortable reading, let's say, div ID main content. Has no idea what an article tag is. That's brand new. So the Modernizer in, let's say, an old version of Firefox or IE goes, oh, you will not understand article, so how about you just pretend it's a div? Essentially, that's what it does. So what you see in an older browser should be the same thing as what you see in a newer browser. So right now we have the basic HTML all set up. Right now, obviously, there's no content, but we will eventually put that in after we build our templating system. So as I said before, the top part of the HTML here is completely standard. This is stuff that we are going to be reusing over and over again. So let's just cut it out. And we are going to paste that into a brand new file, empty file. And we are going to save this file as header.php. We put it, as you can see over here in the files window, we created a folder called inc for includes, so inc, and there is header.php in there. So we just save that. And if we come back to our code here, this is, it is the footer. So we can cut that out and paste that into footer.php. And we save that. Now, we have these different pieces of information that are going to be mechanically, if you will, be placed together by the server when a certain page is called up. And that is what we call the include. So for example, I've got this prepared over here. I'm going to copy that and put it over here. Now, the PHP tag is essentially instructions for the server. So the browser comes over and asks for, let's say, index.php. The server goes on the hard drive, finds that file, starts reading it. As it starts reading it, it reads, okay, PHP, meaning server, I have instructions for you. Server, you are required to find header PHP and paste it in this location in the code. The server goes to the hard drive, finds all this HTML, and basically just pastes it up here. Keeps on reading the HTML, gets to the bottom, and is told to go get footer. Same process, reads footer.php and pastes the HTML over here. So the beauty of the automated system is that the HTML will always be exactly the same. They will either all be perfect or they'll all be broken in the same way. You make one fix and then they are all perfectly okay. So we are using the command, the PHP command require. I've been calling this PHP Includes since the beginning of the tutorial because technically that's what an include does. It goes, fetches a file, and includes it in the current file. However, if we typed in include, it would work perfectly okay, but if there was something wrong and it didn't work okay, you wouldn't be able to tell. It would still serve up HTML, and maybe you'd have a perfectly fine page, no footer. We use require because require basically tells the server, do this or stop or die. So for example, if something is wrong and it doesn't work, you wind up with a white page. You know exactly that it's not working, and that's what we want. We want all our pages to be perfect, so if the programming doesn't work, it stops. You are confronted with the fact that there's something very wrong, and sometimes it's as simple as a missing semicolon or a period, something like that, but you go and you fix it, and then you know the page is okay. Notice that I have something over here called the inc dir. It's short for include directory. So in PHP, the $sign means variable. And we have created a variable here called include directory. Now let me just go fetch it, and I will copy it, and I will explain what this does. Because the header and footer includes are inside a specific folder inside the website, and the template can be used anywhere inside the site, so at root or in any number of folders or subfolders. For the same reason we use root relative paths, let's say for the CSS and JavaScript, we want to do the same thing for the PHP. Now, I could technically just write a root relative path here. I want to introduce the concept of variables because variables are very important in PHP, and it's something that's relatively easy to do, and once you get the hang of it, the power of it is awesome. So at the very, very top, you have a PHP block that declares the variable. So $sign, and the name that you give to your variable, it's really up to you. So the way that it is here is not important. What's important is I have a variable, I give it a name, and then I explain its value. So include directory is equal to something. Now the statement here, okay, is something that's built into PHP. It is a command that retrieves the name of the server that you're on. So for example, if this file was on google.ca, the PHP block over here would return google.ca. If it was on heliomedia.com, it says heliomedia.com. So this is shorthand for PHP. Find out on what machine you're at, and then we will add this part, so this is the path to my include folder, to this. And the little dot that's here is excessively important. In PHP, this means concatenate, which means take this text and sort of paste this text next to it. So my include directory in this example would be, let's say, http pdht.ca/includes. Okay. So in my PHP blocks down here, I say go get me the include directory. So it's the entire path to where the includes folder is. And the only thing I have to be specific about is what file do I want this what file do I want included here? So I'm specifically saying go get header.php. It's inside the include folder. So PHP, set the variable, come down here, go get the header, go get the footer. Now if I take all this code, okay, and I save my document, and I go, let's say, to split view, and I go into live view. Okay. If I go into live code, okay, notice that nothing is really happening. I do not have my regular code. My complete header is not there. My complete footer is not there. And the reason for that is that this document is .html. For the includes to work, you need a PHP file. So I will copy all of this, and I will paste it into something called index.php. I will save this. I'll go back to split view. I will hit live, and I will hit live code. And now I see that my doc type is HTML5. I have my HTML tag over here. I have all the classes that are automatically added by the Modernizer script. It's even added some cascading style sheets information here. I have my SEO block, my description, basically all the stuff that I put inside my header and my footer includes. And that, my friends, is very, very close to the end. The only problem that we have now is that inside my header, I need to put something for my search engine optimization. My title over here has to be unique for every page. Otherwise, if you imagine taking a look at a Google result and only pages from your website were on Google's first page, if the title and the description were always the same, you would have no idea which page is which. You wouldn't be able to choose the most pertinent one. So we have to include a variable inside the title tag and inside the meta description's content, so that on each page we say the title is this, the description is that, and the server will paste those things in the proper place. So syntax is always the same. You start with the same kind of bracket that you do in HTML. You put the 3 letters PHP, and we will use the print command, which we could put echo. They both work. So print a variable, and the variable we will call title. And we close the tag, and we can actually copy this, and we will paste the same thing down here inside the content, and we'll just change the name of the variable to description. Always a good idea to keep things very simple, very easy to understand. So inside the title tag, we have a variable called title. Inside the description tag, we have a variable called description. Save that. And now if we go back to our index, okay, I have my statement up here that defines where the include directory is, but I need to give it 2 more variables. I need to call one title, and another one called description. Now, notice that I have used the word null. Okay. If you put in a variable and you do not define it, when you run the PHP, you're going to hit an error. So if you start off by putting null, it means that the variable is declared with a value of nothing, of 0. It's null. So it's a good way to start off. You put the variables there, the code is ready to work, and in a second step you can go through your different pages and assign values to the variables. So for example, I could go into title, and this is very important, put quotation marks, and you type the title of the page. The only thing that you have to do is keep it below 60 characters. 60 characters is about as long as you're going to see on the Google result page, and after that there's just going to be an ellipsis, the 3 dots, and you're not going to see the end of whatever you wrote. So it's better to have something that fits and is very rich in keywords. So think of what someone would type into Google if they're trying to find this page. So for example, what I did before, something like Montreal web design. So Montreal web design, possibly your name, your location, your specialties, something like that. So really think of what people are most likely to type into Google. The null value does not take quotation marks, but the minute that you type something, you have to put it in quotation marks, otherwise it's not going to work properly. So my description, let's say something like Montreal designer Eric, specializing in HTML, PHP, and CSS. Possibly maybe WordPress and content management systems. Whatever you put, remember the important thing is to get people to or to use terms that people are most likely familiar with and what they might use to try and find you. Just a little side note, search engine optimization is a career choice, excuse me, in and of itself. So some designers are very visual people, some sort of get into the aspect of optimizing websites for search engine results, and in many ways their design skills become focused on text, keywords, structure, and that aspect of the design business. So all of that to say that these two variables up here are very important, okay, for people to be able to find the site. As I said before, if people can't find it, they'll never get to see what it looks like. So if I save this page and I go into my live view and I go into live code, okay, you can see over here that Montreal Web Design has been pasted into the title, and my values over here for the description are in the proper place. And that, my friends, is it. That's what we have to do. You can go from this level and, let's say, add another include, for example, for the navigation, which is a great thing to do because the minute you want to add a page, you add it in one file, boom, all the pages on the website have updated navigation. It's a very, very powerful system. It's not very, very hard to do. And just as a closing note, the way that we defined the path here to the include directory is one way. There are many other ways of doing it. Probably one of the best ways would be to actually include it in the .htaccess file at the root level of the server. That's a bit beyond today's tutorial. But let it be known that this works, but because you have to write it on every page, there's a little performance hit on the server. But for PHP Includes 101, it's the perfect way to start. So that's it, my friends, and I will see you soon in our next tutorial.